The following is a class given by His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj on April 26, 1982 in New Orleans, Louisiana, USA. The class begins with a reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th Canto, Chapter 15, verse 41.
Translation by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge compare the body which is made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to a chariot. The senses are like the horses. The mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The objects of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver. And consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world. Purport by His Divine translation with repetition. Transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge Translation by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge compare the body which is made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to a chariot. The senses are like the horses. The mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The objects of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver. And consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world. Purport by His Divine translation with repetition. Transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge compare the body which is made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to a chariot. The senses are like the horses. The mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The objects of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver. And consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world. Report by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. For a bewildered person in the materialistic way of life, the body, the mind, and the senses, which are engaged in sense gratification, are the cause of bondage to repeated birth, death, old age, and disease. But for one who is advanced in spiritual knowledge, the same body, senses, and mind are the cause of liberation. This is confirmed in the Katha Upanishad as follows. Atmanam rathinam vidhi sariram rathamevacha buddhim tu sarating vidhi mana pragrahamevacha indriyani hayanahut Vishayam steshu gocharan sadhvana paramapnoti tad vishno paramang padam. The soul is the occupant of the chariot of the body, of which the driver is the intelligence. The mind is the determination to reach the destination. The senses are the horses, and the sense objects are also included in that activity. Thus one can reach the destination, Vishnu, who is paramang padam, the supreme goal of life. In conditioned life, the consciousness is the body, is the cause of bondage. But the same consciousness, when transformed into Krishna consciousness, becomes the cause for one's returning home, back to God. The human body, therefore, may be used in two ways. For going to the darkest regions, of ignorance, or for going forward back home, back to Godhead. To go back to Godhead, the path is Mahat Seva, to accept the self-realized spiritual master. Mahat Sevang Dvaram Ahu Vimukte, Mahat Sevang Dvaram Ahu Vimukte. For liberation, one should accept the direction of authorized devotees who can actually endow one with perfect knowledge. On the other hand, Tamodvaram Yoshitan Sangi Sangam. If one wants to go to the darkest regions of material existence, one may continue to associate with persons who are attached to women. Yoshitam Sangi Sangam. The word Yoshit means woman. Persons who are too materialistic are attached to women. It is said therefore, Atmanam Rathinang Vidhi Sarirang Rathang Evacha. The body is just like a chariot or car in which one may go anywhere. One may drive well, or else one may drive whimsically. But in which case, it is quite possible that he may have an accident and fall into a ditch. In other words, if one takes directions from the experienced spiritual master, one can go home, back to Godhead. Otherwise, one may return to the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, Krishna personally advises, Asraddhadhana Purusha Dharmasyasya Parantapa Aprapyama Nivartante Mityu Samsaravartmani. Quote, those who are not faithful on the path of devotional service cannot attain me. O conqueror of foes, but return to birth and death in this material world. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 3. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, personally gives instructions on how one can return home, back to Godhead. But if one does not care to listen to his instructions, the result will be that one will never go back to Godhead, but will continue life in this miserable condition of repeated birth and death in material existence. Mrityu Samsara Vartmani. The advice of experienced transcendentalists, therefore, is that the body being fully engaged in for achieving the ultimate goal of life, Swartha Gatim. The real interest or goal of life is to return home back to Godhead, to enable one to fulfill this purpose. There are so many Vedic literatures, including Vedanta Sutra, the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, and the Ramayana. One should take lessons from these Vedic literatures and learn how to practice Nibbitti Marg. Then one's life will be perfect. The body is important as long as it has consciousness. Without consciousness, the body is merely a lump of matter. Therefore, to return home back to Godhead, one must change his consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness. One's consciousness is the cause of material bondage. But if this consciousness is purified by Bhakti Yoga, one can then understand the falsity of his upadi, his designations as Indian, American, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and so on. Sarvopadi, the nirmuktam, tatparatvena nirmalam. One must forget these designations and use this consciousness only for the service of Krishna. Therefore, if one takes advantage of the Krishna consciousness movement, his life is certainly successful. Thus end the purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Ki! Thank you. The translation again is that transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge compare the body, which is made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to a chariot. The senses are like the horses, the mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The objects of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver, and consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world. So today, the transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge have given us a very nice analogy, whereby we can understand what is our situation within this body, what is our situation within this material world. First of all is that the body was not produced by accident or by some evolution. It says here it was made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna desired and ordered that bodies be made, and Lord Brahma, he started to create them. Just as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Aham bija pradapita. I am the eternal Father who gives all the seeds to create life. The seed-giving Father. Each living entity is coming from a seed, one type or another. And those seeds are ultimately given by Krishna. And those persons, those Brahmas who create the universe, they take the seeds and create bodies from them to fill out the universe. The original blueprint is given by Krishna, and they're made on his order. Just like in a factory. The factory's architect gives the blueprint, and then they give the order to the assembly line, and they start to produce. Of course, one can mix the parts around and get different combinations, but the basic blueprint is given by Krishna. Saki is like a modern day chariot, more than the carriage, I would say. But anyway, senses are like the horses, the mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The objects of the senses of the destinations, intelligence is the chariot driver. So, this body is the vehicle for taking us around. This analogy has been given so many different ways. In the Bhagavatam it is also described as a boat. Samasita Jayapataka Swami Maharaj Punya Yasodharade Bhavanga Bodhi Vatsa Padanga 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 Di Padanga Natesha. A boat whereby we can cross over this material world, which is like the ocean. So here the analogy is given that this body is a vehicle. But in this case, the vehicle is not being used to cross us over the material world. It is being used to drive us after objects of senses. So, just as one who trains horses knows that by repeated training and patience and various kind of stimulation, one can gradually bring the horses under control, but it requires a strong hand. Like anyone, if they're allowed to be free continuously, then they'll become more and more difficult to control. Especially if it are wild horses who have not been trained before. The senses of the people, at least in the Western world, are practically like wild horses. They're hardly put under control. Whatever one wants, one heads for that direction. You've seen how sometimes the baby dogs are running this way and that way, this way and that way. Just whatever hits their mind to run there, then they turn around and run the other way. Just completely under the control of their senses. Similarly, these senses, if they're not controlled, then they'll drag us here and there. A person wants a cigarette. At 2 o'clock in the morning, he'll drive down to the 24-hour, all-night place just to get a pack of cigarettes. This is liberty, this is real freedom, you see. There's a question. They're completely, wherever the senses demand, the guy who won't even be able to get to sleep unless he runs and gets this or that or whatever. But they think that's freedom. They don't realize that they're simply being driven around by wild horses. Because they can't control the horses, therefore wherever they take them, when the horse calms down a little bit because you give it whatever it wanted, then you think, oh, relief. This is freedom. It's a complete illusion. Therefore people They waste their life running after the objects of the senses. Instead of controlling their wild horses with their mind for any useful purpose, all the control is given is simply to achieve a given end. That's why it said that even a materialist appears to have all good qualities. We know that the ultimate objection of that materialist is some form of sense gratification. So even if he seems to have developed some kind of sense control, but he's a materialist, we know that that sense control is only because he's got some other material objective. Just like someone mentioned how the mayor always was tough on us, and one day somebody said, you know, we really like you, we're all going to vote for you. Oh, really? And suddenly he became very friendly. So, very smiley. So this is the type of situation, is that people, like politicians, may smile and kiss babies during the campaign time. They seem to control their anger and their every other quality just to keep on the plastic smiles, because they want to attract a lot of votes. So even though it appears that they do tremendous austerity, in India sometimes when campaigning, they give 16 lectures in one day. By helicopter they'll go one place to the next place. I was really envying them if we could only have a helicopter like that. I read 16 lectures in one day with hundreds of thousands of people. That would be, I'm sure we could easily do it if we just had the helicopter. And it appears that they do a tremendous austerity. One of the politicians had a heart attack trying to keep up with the other one. And trying to keep up with the expense it costs, they all have heart attacks. But, so they appear to show a tremendous amount of sense control in some cases, but it's based upon their destination being objects of the senses. So ultimately they're in strict bondage. And once that immediate pressure of achieving some particular intense desire is over, they can do anything at any moment. Just like, I believe we saw the picture upstairs of Devaki being taken to the wedding, from the wedding with Vasudeva, and suddenly, by Kamsa, suddenly when a Dvaivavani, or a word from the demigods, came down, that the 8th son of Devaki will be your death. Immediately Kamsa said, what? Grabbed Devaki by the hair, his own sister, pulled out his sword, ready to decapitate her right on the spot. Your son's going to kill me? And then immediately was going to kill him. This is the demonic principle. He was so nice, and my sister, my brother-in-law. Suddenly the word came that your sister's 8th son is going to be your death. Finished. It's the last thing. You step in right to it, you're finished. So this is the so-called niceties of the materialist. It may appear very nice, but if you cross them, or if at any moment there's a little bit of change in the situation, you see, you can be put in a fire of sacrifice, burnt to a toast at any moment. The Chanakya Pandit said, never trust, especially never trust politicians and lawyers and materialistic women and so many different categories. He warned us that we have to be very careful. So, any materialist is someone that you can't fully depend upon, because they're being taken around in their chariot by wild horses and they don't have control. This is the difficulty. So, we have to be like horse trainers. We have to train our senses. And we do that by having a tight grip on the reins. What are the reins? That's the mind. We put a tight grip on the reins, and what is the driver? That's the intelligence. So the intelligence is the driver is the one who decides what destination I want to go to. If he decides I want to go to the destination of this sense gratification or that sense gratification, of meat eating, and this is sex, gambling, or intoxication, he's going to drive his chariot in that direction. That tight grip on that chariot is not of any use, because actually it's the senses who are dictating to the intelligence those destinations. When the intelligence directs his chariot, holds on the rein, the mind, and directs his horses, the senses, to serve Krishna, to engage in the devotional service of the Lord, then he's making progress back to Godhead. Then that same consciousness, which was at one time directing him, simply follow the senses directions. When that same consciousness is turned to Krishna consciousness and is directing us to follow the instructions of Krishna, head towards the spiritual world, that consciousness delivers us. So, how the mind can be controlled? It's only by the intelligence. The trouble is that by repeated sense gratification, one's mind intelligence becomes weak, becomes weakened, and the senses become stronger. So the intelligence, when it's weaker, it's hard to hold tight onto the reins. The mind goes here and there. It's already like brain fag. Just can't pull on it. So therefore one is in a difficult situation. But if one at least has good association, if one has a spiritual master who is guiding one, then in that way there's guarantee that one can reach the destination as long as one follows the spiritual master and keeps in the good association. The spiritual master must be Mahat. He must be a devotee of the Lord. He must not be a sense gratifier attached to material sense gratification. Persons who are too materialistic, they cannot be a bona fide spiritual master, because they're also in a chariot which has run away with them. They don't have full control of their chariot, so therefore how can they guide other people to the proper destination when they themselves are a little bit out of control? So Prabhupada said there's two alternatives. One may drive well, or else one may drive whimsically, in which case it is quite possible that he may have an accident and fall into a ditch. Sometimes people, they want to drive too fast without following the necessary traffic regulations, and as a result they fall into a ditch. I think on the way out to Mayapur you've seen many trucks which have fallen into the ditch because they don't follow any regulations. And also the road is very bad. But that's the material road. They're not actually going to Mayapur. They're going up to Guwahati or down to Calcutta. They take a little wine and they drive at night. And then they slip off into the ditch. And when these big lorries, they're supposed to hold 10 tons, they load them up with 14 tons, 15 tons. They take one wheel goes off the road, then the whole thing flips over right on its back like it's some kind of shelled in the beetle or something, and just, that's it, upside down. You see him left and right on the road. So if one drives whimsically without paying attention to his own consciousness, without paying, these people drink and they do this, without driving at a proper speed, without taking care when there are various pitfalls in the way, when the road gets rough they have to slow down. If you don't take care of all these things, then you're going to fall into a ditch. So in other words, Prabhupada says that if one takes the directions from the experienced spiritual master, one can go back home, back to Godhead. Otherwise, one may return to the cycle of birth and death. So, this is a very nice example, and Prabhupada here gives us some further idea that just like nowadays people like to belong to the AAA, so that they can get nice road maps, and if you get in a ditch they can be picked up. Actually the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is just meant for that purpose, to give one the road map. The road maps of the Vedic literatures, which in ISKCON have been translated into English and other contemporary languages. And the Vedanta Sutra, Upanishad, Vedanta Sutra's natural commentary is this Srimad Bhagavatam. The Upanishads, like the Ishopanishad, and the Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, which I understand Acharya Dev is translating now, and the Ramayana. These are some of the many Vedic literatures, and especially these literatures one is recommended to practice. And Prabhupada said, for what? To practice Nivritti Marg. And the Vritti Marg is a technical name for what? Who knows? Yes? The path of detachment. Congratulations. And what is the opposite path called? Pravritti Marg, which means? The positive steps. Who? Yes, it's the path of sense and Goswami Da.
What does it mean? It's not sacred, but is there any possibility to follow the karma? Probably that actually this age there are no karmas, or good karmas. We're referring to one who at least follows the judgments first. And in that respect, we play with the verse of
What's the exact question?
What is any value to follow the karma? In the pure bhakti of this, what is
the Karma Kanda rules are more strict than the rules for Krishna consciousness. Of course, you can keep your independent mentality, but the actual rules of Karma Kanda are so strict that a lot of them depend upon expert brahmanas, which you don't have, doing various kinds of sacrifices and chanting certain mantras which people are not capable of doing properly. In basic, people do follow the Karma Kanda they're supposed to follow. If they don't be Krishna conscious, then they're supposed to follow that. But basically, they can hardly do it. If you don't surrender to Krishna consciousness, if you don't serve Krishna, then you shouldn't desert your mother and father. You shouldn't break up the family. It's not considered to be, it's against the Karma Kanda. But no one follows that anyway. They just put their old mother and father in old folks' home. If they're lucky, that. So, the problem about Karma Kanda is that people they can't follow that very well either. But if they're not Krishna conscious, then they're supposed to follow that. As far as possible, they're supposed to follow that. Even in other ages, they made a mistake and they became lizards and they became different with King Mriga and others. What to speak of this age? What do they have going for them? Of course, the advantage is if you think about doing a good thing, you get the result even if you don't do it. In other ages, if you thought about doing a bad thing, you get the result even if you didn't do it. If one has all desires, you should still do devotional service. If one has no desires, you should do devotional service. If one has desire for liberation, you should do pure devotional service to the Lord. In other words, you should do Tibrena Bhakti Yogina. Tibrena means just like the sunlight comes down, just comes out unimpeded, doesn't have any other contamination, includes everything. So just by worshipping Krishna, He knows what desire you have in your heart. If you have all kinds of desires, you want to be the Indra Deva, you want to do this, you want to do whatever. He knows, so you don't have to give in your shopping list to Him. He already knows what desire you have, and He knows better than you do what it would take to satisfy that particular desire. So He will automatically fulfill that desire, and then instead of going back to Godhead, you may want to first go to the heavenly planet. Prabhupada says that most of His disciples, I didn't hear directly, I heard this at second hand, that most or many of the disciples had actually had desire to go to the heavenly planets. I don't know any details on that quote, but maybe indicating a lot of the people that left the movement already also, that their actual desire was to go to heavenly planets. It wasn't really to go back to God, it was to have a very comfortable material situation, free from all kind of misery and so on, which is the heavenly planet situation. So, people that want a very comfortable material situation, that don't sacrifice, that don't want to actually go back to Krishna and give up, I'll say they want to completely give up sex life, or give up completely material enjoyment, by worshipping Krishna purely, they will be transferred to the heavenly planets, and from there, they may be transferred back to Godhead, if they don't fall down again. So Prabhupada assured that his disciples who worship like that, they'll go to the heavenly planets also, confirm that. So that's the sarvakama. Those who are actually pure devotees, they simply want to serve Krishna wherever he sends him, wherever he sends them, or under whatever circumstance. Obviously they should also be performing pure devotional service. Very obviously they should be performing other kind of activities which would not satisfy Krishna to that extent. Then, those who want liberation, to practice this type of strict meditation and austerities to achieve liberation by mental speculation or by other processes of yoga, it's not at all recommended. One's also recommended you should perform pure devotional service, and he's desiring, I want to end all the misery. Liberation desire is such that he wants to end the misery. He doesn't actually have a positive desire to really serve Krishna eternally. Doesn't really want to reestablish that eternally. He just wants to end the misery. He doesn't want to work so hard and actually get completely Krishna prema. Just somehow or another hold out to the end of life and just finish. No more birth, no more death. It's too much trouble in this material world. That type of desire is more for the desire of liberation than actually desire for devotional service. More a negative response to why you become Krishna conscious. I can't stand the material world and cry it out. That's the desire for liberation. You see, then a person says that I'm cried out from the material world. I'm disgusted with the material world. It's so miserable, but I want to develop my pure devotional service. That desire doesn't usually come in the beginning. People don't immediately come to Krishna consciousness because they love Krishna. Usually they come because of one of the other two. They have some material desire, or they have some desire for liberation. And after serving for some time, then they actually get attracted to Krishna personally. They develop some Krishna consciousness, and they want to actually become a pure devotee. They develop no desire, akam. So when they develop no desire, they should still continue doing the devotional service. See? Yes?
I noticed in Bhagavad Gita that Krishna explains the energy trait. This roots outward, breaks down. Can you perhaps explain that?
Why don't we stick to this verse? Yes?
When the devotee develops no desire, he migrated limited experience. It appears that devotees are still very desirous of serving Krishna, and they also have so many anxieties to get things done for Krishna. That they may be detached, but still they exhibit so many personal traits. So that no desire would also mean desire for Krishna.
Yes, akama means no desire, means the desire in Krishna. No one can be desireless. We don't become a stone. It means we have no material desire. That's the point, is that the devotee becomes ultimately as active and more active than the karmis. Although it's a very stiff competition, because the karmis are very much under the mode of passion. So from the mode of goodness type of platform. But in any case, the devotees, they become on the perfectional platform so fired up, so enthusiastic to serve Krishna, and their desires are so strong in that regard. Just like that devotee Raktak was fanning Krishna, he became overwhelmed with ecstasy, tears were coming from his eyes, he was choked up, he couldn't see, and he began cursing the ecstasy, that it's interfering with my fanning of Krishna. And he was because his desire was so strong. So it wasn't even that he had a desire for the ecstasy, he was actually desirous of serving Krishna. And even the ecstasy he found to be, ecstasy of loving Krishna, he found to be an interruption. So we see how enthusiastic Hanuman was, that he burned down the whole Lanka because he was so angry that this Ravana had stolen Rama's consort, the goddess of fortune, Srimati Sita Devi. And he picked up a whole mountain when he was trying to get the medicine for Lakshmana. He didn't know which herb it was on the mountain they told him to go to, so he picked up the whole mountain and brought it back and to Rama and said, because he's only a money, couldn't figure out which herb it was, you take the one you want. So the devotees are very enthusiastic, have a lot of desire. Mother Yasoda, she was in anxiety with Krishna, he wasn't eating. But that, different flavors and ecstasy, those desires to serve Krishna, or you can say that Paramatma yogis would consider it as different forms of meditation, different forms of samadhi or trance, because the nomenclature is all absolute truth, Krishna. And the process of being anxiety for serving Krishna or thinking of Krishna are different forms of meditation. And those forms of meditation all give one's transcendental pleasure. One is serving Krishna and is in great anxiety. I found the greatest satisfaction serving Krishna under the greatest stress levels, under the greatest anxiety. And when things seem to go smooth and there's not a lot of stress and don't always get as deep a taste for devotional service. Of course, we haven't had that problem for some time. There always seems to be plenty of obstacles to cross over. So that's why as a devotee makes advancement in Krishna, creates situations where one is forced to surrender in Krishna more and more. But for the non-devotee, it may appear to be like something difficult. Just like the 5 Pandavas, they were put in various situations. Mother Draupadi was tried to be stripped naked in the assembly of kings by Dusasana, I believe, and at that time she completely surrendered to Krishna, calling out on His holy name, and then He provided an unlimited amount of sari, or became unlimited sari, and she couldn't be stripped. Her chastity was maintained. Her prestige was maintained. So, for her, of course, she became more and more attached to Krishna through all of these difficulties. Finally, Krishna established them as the emperors of the world, and they did so not out of a desire to actually be the emperor, which Arjuna showed he wasn't interested in fighting for himself. They only did it because they knew it was the desire of Krishna, and they did it to establish a Krishna-conscious kingdom in the world. And that's why, for 1,000 years, even into the Kali Yuga, the descendants of the 5 Pandavas maintained Kali Yuga's influence away from the world. So here, it says that something was made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What is that? Yes? And what is the body compared to? These are 2 cookie questions, warming up. Then, what were the horses compared to? Raise your hand. What are the objects of the senses compared to? You had your hand up first, I believe. The destinations. And what was the rains compared to? And the intelligence? What driver? Yes? Congratulations. And what was the cause of bondage in this material world? The consciousness. Now, see if I can get a 3-cookie question here. So the human body may be used in 2 ways. You have your hand up first? Alright, give you a chance. So we have our Rigodar, the unbiased verses. For going back to the darkest regions of ignorance, or for going forward back home, back to God. I guess it's so. Hare Krishna. Then we have here that if one wants to go to the darkest region of material existence, who should he associate with? Yes. Especially those who are too attached materially to women. And what should one do to go back to Godhead? We have to accept something. Yes, and what? How does he accept him? Mahat Sevan Vana Mahurvi Mukte. For liberation, one should accept the direction of authorized devotees who can actually endow one with the perfect knowledge. To go back to Godhead, the path is Mahat Seva, to accept the self-realized spiritual master. 3 could be. Now we go up to 4. If one does not care to listen to his instructions of the Supreme Personality God representative, then what will continue? Then, in his miserable condition of repeated birth and death, he will continue life in this miserable condition of repeated birth and death in material existence. Mrityu samsara vartani. What were the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Wow. This would be a 3. I'll have 1 on the end for 5. What are the 5 scriptures mentioned by Srila Prabhupada, the Vedic literatures, that one could take lessons from to practice in the Vritti Marg? What you said, the Srimad Bhagavatam? He didn't get them all.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, Mahabharata, and
the Srimad Bhagavatam wasn't specifically mentioned. Srimad Bhagavatam is considered as the commentary of Vedanta Sutra. So when Vedanta Sutra is mentioned, it includes the Srimad Bhagavatam. So you got Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam will put it the other way. You got 3. But there's still 1. Well, between the 2, it's the Vedanta Sutra, Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Mahabharata. And the Ramayana. You didn't mention the Ramayana. So one should take lessons from these Vedic literatures, learn how to practice. Let's just... Nivritti Marg. So, one thing is that since one's consciousness is the cause of bondage, one's consciousness has to be purified by Bhakti Yoga. Then what is the consciousness purified from? Yes? Yes? Can we have a description of what is that material consciousness? What type of misidentification? Yes. What does it describe that as in the Narada Pancharatra? If one thinks he's a body, then what does he think he is? He has so many false designations, bodies. So there's a lot of people that are pretty close to that. The one here, you're filling in. The exact thing is that one's consciousness is the cause of material bondage, but if this consciousness is purified by Bhakti Yoga, one can then understand the falsity of his upadhi, his designations as Indian, American, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and so on. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparadvena nirmalam. One must forget these designations and use this consciousness only for the service of Krishna. Therefore, if one takes advantage of the Krishna conscious movement, his life is certainly successful. Thank you very much. Thank you. Maharaj.